Hello and welcome to this seventh episode of The Visible Workplace. My name is Tom Rolley, and unfortunately, as you heard on the last episode, it's just me. We've lost Annabelle to the vocal cord nodules. She's doing well. She's into speech pathology, but for the moment, it's just going to be me. But we have an interesting podcast coming up. This one is called Can't See What, Can't See How. Can't see what and can't see how. This is a very difficult place for businesses to operate from, and yet unfortunately it is something that commonly happens. What does this actually mean? Well, why don't we break it down and look at each of these segments separately, and then we'll bring them in together. So if you can't see what does this mean? Well, it basically means that I'm not clear on what I'm meant to be producing. Like, what's the final outcome that I'm going for? I don't know what that is. This is an awkward place to be. It leaves me guessing as to what I'm meant to be up to. It leaves me struggling to work out, well, what are the preceding results that I would require in order to get that final result? Some things are the final result, but they're made up and require other things before that. There might have been input from other people or particular materials, and I'm trying to create this thing that I don't know what I'm trying to create, and I can't be confident in that at all because I don't know what needs to go into it. It's a giant mess. I am blind to what I'm meant to be creating. What about can't see how? Well, can't see how's a little bit different. It's not so much around the results that we're after, but it's the instructions to get those results. Now, I get it that if you know what the results are that you're going for, then a lot of people will be able to work out the preceding steps. And there may well be multiple ways to get to that same final result. And if I am able to be clear on what I want, then I can hand that over to my team and say, hey, this is what I want. And they may find different ways of getting there. But there's a problem. You see, if I'm trying to get a consistent final result and everybody keeps doing it different ways, then that final result will be subtly different. I've actually tried this out with the recipe. It's called pork and eggplant. It's out of a Sydney restaurant, and I don't think we've had the same outcome once. Now, why is that? Well, we keep using slightly different ingredients with slightly different times, with slightly different ways of doing things, and so it ends up slightly different every time. And this might be okay in some enterprises and some businesses. It's like, hey, this is a one-off and this is a one-off and this is a one-off. And even though they're the same basic concept, that there are differences, and that's what makes them unique and more valuable. But in other businesses, hey, I want a consistently delivered result. Every time I want to show up and I want to get the same thing. I want my coffee to be made the same way. I want to receive that same meal when I go to the restaurant, not a different one. So the can't see how is dealing with, how do we do this? How do I actually, what are the steps involved? If I want to have this particular outcome, then what are those particular steps that need to be done? And are they available? Can I find them? Can I use them? Have they been written down? And if they are written down, can I get access to them? So can't see how deals with the what do I do? And the can't see what is, well, what do those instructions produce? What am I trying to create? Because at the end of the day, what you want in business and what you want in life is really those end results, those results at the end, and go, yep, this is the result I want. And if in your business, then you consistently deliver a great result, then that is of significant value. And presumably with consistent instructions, you can sell that consistent result for a much higher price. If you're disorganized, if you're struggling and you and your team don't know what you're trying to do, or you're having to tell your team what it is that they're trying to do, or you do it a different way every time, then the value of what you're delivering goes down. And this might lead to all sorts of stresses and problems and working late, that you haven't seen your partner in like 3 weeks, your kids don't know you, your kids don't like you, you've developed a drinking habit or a drug habit or a sex habit, and life generally is not going very well. And it's a very difficult place to be. And the last thing that you want to be trying to sort out is, well, how do I see what we're doing, and how do I see how we do it? And yet that's what you've got to do. But one more place that's even worse than either of these. Let's say that you can't see what you've got, but you do have how you do it. Or the alternatively, you can't see how you do it, but you've got what you want. There is a worse place, and that is that you can't see what and you can't see how. And this is a recipe for major problems in a business. And one of the cruel ironies of business is that you can operate without really knowing what it is that you're producing and how you do it for quite some time. And the problem is you're successful, but as you start getting more successful and more demand comes on board and you bring in more people to help, now the problem is exposed, except you're trying to sort this out with all of the requirement to continue to execute in the business. So you got this problem that's very difficult, pretty intractable, while being stressed and having all of these problems appear. And it's like, oh my goodness, this is very hard to deal with. But if you can't see what and you can't see how, then people have to ask you, hey, what are we doing? What are we trying to create here? They're coming to you, or they're coming to your managers, say, hey, what are we doing? What are we trying to do here? And then they are having to ask, well, how do we do that? How do you want that done? Is there a way? And you might be able to get away with, hey, I just want these results, go sort it out. And that can be a really helpful under pressure solution. It's like, I just want this done. I don't care how you do it, just get it done. But over time, you'll need to document that and go, okay, great, this is how we do these. And then you'll start to get consistency. And if people have to ask and people don't know what they want and people don't know how to do those things, then the consequences on your team are quite severe. They will be uncertain. They won't be able to be certain to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is the work that I'm doing at the moment. This is how it's meant to be done. And so they're going to be uncertain. They're going to hesitate. They're going to be unsure. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be errors, which decreases confidence. And suddenly you've got a management of people problem. And it can look like that. And people keep making mistakes, and perhaps your management or you were like, come on, you can do better. But they can't do better because they can't see what and they can't see how. And you can spend a lot of time and effort working with people and say, hey, this is what I want. And they learn it. And then things change. And then they're stuck again. This is a problem. But more than this, if you have any one of these three problems, you can't see what, you can't see how, or you can't see what and you can't see how, then your business is vulnerable. There's a number of vulnerabilities that come up with these problems. If somebody is sick and they've been working on a particular project and they're the only ones who know where anything is, or it's only on their computer, then you have a problem. They really don't want to have to share all of the stuff that needs to be shared when they're sick and ill. They're hopefully recovering in bed, resting, allowing their bodies to heal. But instead, you're on the phone, hey, where's that file? Where are we up to? So if people get sick, you've got a problem. Next up, if you've got job shares, If you've got someone working 2 days and someone working 3 days on the same job, then you've got a problem every time there's a handover, which is twice a week. Twice a week, there's a handover from the first person to the second person, and then a handover back from the second person to the first person. And each of these handovers, if you can't see what you're doing and you can't see how you're doing it, these all have to be verbally communicated. We're on this, we're on this, we're on this, this is happening here, don't forget this and this over here. Now, what's the risk? Hey, things get forgotten to be spoken about, or things get spoken about and then forgotten. It's a little like that MasterChef. I don't know if you've seen the episodes where they have different people cooking the same meal. And very commonly things go wrong because in that verbal handover of, hey, we've got this sauce going on, we've got to describe what the final dish is, where we're up to, what ingredients still have to come, what preps still need to be done. A lot has to be communicated in that time. And often then they've got to go do it and they forget about things. And so the recipe typically has to be rescued at the end. And that might be part of the episode. But essentially, we are dealing with that situation whenever you've got a handover. Even if someone retires or quits and they do a handover for the next person, at least that's just a one-off. But if you've got a job share, then it's literally twice a week that all of the work and all of where it's up to and everything that needs to be done is being handed over. Next up, your situational vulnerability, headhunting. Now, headhunting is particularly cruel around if you can't see how, because it takes away all of that person's knowledge when they leave the business. So one of your key people that you know that you're a bit reliant on, that if you didn't have them, then you'd be vulnerable, then the business wouldn't work as well. And then they get headhunted. And what's walking out the door is all of their knowledge and experience. That how you do things is in their head, and it just got headhunted and taken out of the business. And it's going to be a little bit difficult if you're given 2 weeks and they're trying to brain dump everything that they know into some kind of just mess. And that's if you get that at all. And now you've got a problem because how things are done in the business just left. And it's like, how do we do that? I don't know how they do that. Now, I want you also to catch in this situation that they have an ability to get some leverage on you. If they're the only one who knows how to do a particular thing, and you know that that's a mission critical part of your business, but they know how to do it and you kind of do, but maybe you don't really. And if push came to shove, you're like, actually, I don't really know. I need them to stay. And they're like, you know what? Cost of living's going up, inflation's going up, need a pay rise. And you're like, you know what? No. And they're like, okay, good luck. They've got you because they're the ones who know how things are done. And finally, and we saw this in COVID, but it is the ability to work remotely. You see, in the traditional workplace, there's a lot of communication that goes on at the water cooler, or I can lean across and ask my coworker, hey, what's going on? What are we working on here? But when we went remote, that suddenly became more difficult. And yes, there was Zoom, and you're hanging out on Zoom and kind of like zooming away, having a conversation, but also trying to do the work at the same time. But when you can't see what and you can't see how, then remote work becomes far more vulnerable. But if we move across and say, you know what, Tom, is there another way? What would be possible? Imagine that there was a magic wand and it's like, Trump, you know what? I'd really love it if we can see what we're doing. And you could see the final results and you could see or at least rapidly interpret, hey, what am I going to need to get that final result? Like, I want this final result. How am I going to get there? I'm going to need this, this, and this. And you documented all of those. I had this exact situation. I was building a new funnel. And I was like, I was having a hard time like getting all of the pieces in place, because there was pages and there was advertising and there was emails and there was offer, like checkout pages. And I went to a cool program called Geru, Geru. I think it's $67 for lifetime. It's a pretty cool program. But I went to that and I laid out the structure. And then I could see, I'm like, okay, I need a page here, a page here, a page here, and a page here. There's 4 pages. And I need an email here, and I need 2 emails here, and 1 more email here. And then I need some advertising here. And suddenly all of the intermediate results, which was the pages and the emails and the advertising, to create that final working funnel were clear. It was very clear. But I didn't just leave it in that Geru picture. I then went, okay, well, this needs to come across and enter into the project management system. And I loaded up those things. If I'm going to have a working funnel, then here's the pages and here's the emails and here's the advertising. And in that, also thinking about the smaller things. Okay, well, I'm going to need some tags. I'm going to need an opt-in form. I'm going to need an offer checkout page. I'm going to need the, and suddenly all of these smaller aspects of those intermediate results were apparent as well. And I could see what I was aiming for. And if I do all those things, then I will have a working funnel. It's pretty cool. Consider what most people do with this, though. They go, I want a funnel, or I want a webinar, or I want whatever it is. And they just jump in and start working away. And what typically happens is exhaustion, because of the underestimation of just how much had to be done. And they're like, oh my goodness, I've got to do 2 more videos. Oh, I've got to write 3 more emails. I've got to write an opt-in form. Oh, wait, what was that? How did that all fit together? Oh, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because they weren't clear on the final result and they didn't build the intermediate results. And so all this work went in, but it didn't get finished. It's like a partially completed bridge. It's not of much use. Unless the whole thing gets done, it's not of much use. But this, if I can see what I'm going for, then our chances of completion go up a lot. Now let's talk about if we can see how. Well, now we've got some instructions. And before you freak out and say, oh my goodness, I don't like instructions, I want to give you some good news. You can start really basically, like literally just big step, big step, big step. Create this, create this, create this. In the example of the funnel, we could have create the pages, create the emails, and create the advertising. And you might just have those as your 3 processes. And if they got done, then you would have the pages and the emails and the advertising, and then put it together. And you're like, whoa, I did it. And you don't need to list every tiny little thing. But as you go along and you know that it works, that's important. Like you got to make sure that the big steps work. And you're like, okay, I'm going to build those pages and I'm going to write the emails and I'm going to do the ads and set them up. Okay, this works. Then you can start to add detail. And you want to do that detail not for an experienced person. If you've already done 17 of these things before, guess what? You can just look at the 3 big steps and go, great, I'm done. But if we're going to bring Mary in from accounting and put her on funnel building and she's never done it before, then that's when the detail really helps. And she's like, okay, what template? Oh, this template. Okay, fill in this. Okay, take these prompts and stick them in ChatGPT and then take the output and put it in here. Okay, it's going to be slower. But if it's in a pinch and your 3-star funnel builders just walked out and got sick and came down for the next 3 weeks with a nasty illness, then you're like, okay, we need to hire and we need to all hands on deck to sort this out. And that becomes a possibility for you if you have instructions. But in the early stages, keep them broad, keep them easy, keep them big picture. But if you do have the detail, then it means that someone with a decreased level of competence, never done it before, can still get a pretty good outcome. And then we talk about this last little one, can see what and can see how. I want you to consider that people will use the instructions under one condition, and that is that it's easier to use the instructions than not use them. This comes into the idea of atomic habits. James Clear, really great book. It's like, hey, if you want to have something happen, then make it obvious. Put it right there. And so if we put the instructions right there with the work that we're trying to create, then it becomes much more likely that I'm going to use them. I'm like, well, it'll make my life easier. If we hide those instructions, let's say they're done, they're beautifully done, but we put them upstairs in a cupboard that's locked, now becomes a lot harder to get to those instructions. I'm not going to do it. It's going to be easier for me to create without the instructions if I don't make it easy to use them. But if they're right there, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to use it. This will reduce my cognitive load. This will increase my accuracy, make my life better, increase my confidence. I'm like, yeah, if the instructions are right there, well, I'm going to probably use them. You might find some stubborn people who are like, you know what? Yep, I'm just going to use it as a quick checklist, or I've done this so many times that I'm not going to use it. But you could still argue that things change, and if the instructions change, then that person that's doing it on automatic needs to be forced to say, hey, something changed. Something changed here. Hey, signing off, yeah, I saw something change. Oh, okay, I've got to change the way that I have been memorized doing it. So this is the power of SOP software. It can force people before they can complete to look at, or even at the beginning, to say, hey, something changed. Step 3 changed. Check it out. And they're like, I acknowledge that step 3 changed. Okay, great. But when you have this, then you get a flexibility and adaptability in your business that's very powerful. If you have the same design that everyone on the team uses for project management, then we can move staff around to cover deficiencies and sickness. We have clean handovers. The documentation stays with the business and doesn't walk out the door. You can't be blackmailed because that one person is the only one who knows how to do it. It's like, okay, yep, you know how to do it. We'll watch you. Okay, now we got it. If they're being stubborn, and it's questionable whether you want someone like that on your team anyway. And then finally, there's a much higher valuation for your business, which is pretty cool. A business with the instructions that lead to defined results is of significantly higher value because the requirement to have particular people execute is not there. This is why franchises work. This is why McDonald's works. You can bring any 14, 15, 16-year-old into that situation, train them up on what to do. They've only really got one result to create. Off you go. Great. There's a simplicity in that business that allows for a training of people without much skill and to get a consistent result. Most likely, you're probably not in a business like that. That your business has more complexity, has more subtlety, has more nuance, has more creativity. And perhaps the fear is you're like, oh, wow, if we have these results and we have these documented and I can see what we're trying to do and I can see how we do it, then where's the creativity? But I want you to consider that even going for the same final results each time, hey, I'm producing this report for this client, there's going to be a skill set that comes in of your creativity, your skill sets, your ability to look at the whole situation. But that will be greatly enhanced if you can see what you're trying to do and see the best practices for how to do it. And so how are you going to do this? I mean, that's probably where we're at as we head into the final stretches of this episode. Well, one of the things I want to suggest to you is that if you have a consistent design for how you set up the work of your business, then this really helps. This really helps because you're not having to train people on different designs, different templates of how you set up the projects for every different part of the business. Oh, we've got one template for how we do ads, and then we've got another one for how we manage our customers, and then we've got another one for how we do our accounting. And then Jenny set one up for marketing, and Bill did one over here for our taxes and our tax prep. And you go, okay, great. We've now got 32 different ways of tracking the work in the business. And this means there's not any consistency and there's not any interoperability. And what's happened is that the idea of managing the project has been hijacked by the work of that particular project. And we're trying to do the work of the project in the tracking. But if we just have a consistent design that just tracks what we're doing and how we're doing it, then that allows whatever the work is, whether it's in accounting or whether it's in fulfillment or whether it's in advertising, to be set up the same way. And then doing the work is held in a document that I can access really quickly. So the document's got the variance, not the project management setup. Next up, if we're going to have this consistent design, well, and we want to make it easier for people to have the instructions, then we probably should put the instructions with the results we're trying to create. And we could have instructions for the intermediate results and then perhaps the final instruction to create the final result. But the instructions are right there with the results. This would be helpful. This would mean that I can just look and go, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I've got these steps and I can see that it's going to produce these things. This is pretty easy. So, step 2, include the processes and the results in your design. Next up, well, what's it important to track? Well, you'll probably find that what's important is, hey, what's the status on this thing? You know, is it not started? Is it being worked on? Is it scheduled? Is it paused? Are we waiting for something? Is it done? All of these kind of statuses of where the work is. And there's one particularly good reason to track statuses, and that is that there is a dopamine hit for you and your team as these things move to done. It's like, yep, done. There is a good feeling there. If you don't track the statuses, then you don't get that little dopamine hit, as well as not being able to see where you're up to. We also might benefit from tracking who's responsible, like who's doing this particular aspect of the work. And this means that you can really get some great synergy between your team members. There are some things on your team that the team should do and some things that they shouldn't. That somebody's really strong at front of house and somebody's really strong at back-end production, but they do not want to be on camera or producing a podcast for love or money. And there might be someone who is great on camera, but coming back in, they're terrible. They're confused, they're overwhelmed, bored. And if we can get both of those people on a project, because there's a front-end production part, a recording of the video, and then there's a back-end production part, but we could say, hey, these people are here and these people are there. This is very helpful. Lastly, probably worth tracking the due dates. Like, hey, when's this thing due? Because you will have some projects that are long term that have due dates that you might want to set intermediate due dates. Hey, we're on schedule, we're on target. You might have things that are due very soon and you want to know about that. So tracking due dates is really worthwhile. And then finally, as I already suggested, that we can start rough and say, hey, this is what I think we're going to produce, this final result. I think we're going to need this and this. Document those. Hey, I think we're going to need to do this, this, and this. Document that. And then try it out. Try it out and see what happens. Run the system. Did you get what you wanted? And if you did, then great. Guess what? You've got a working prototype, and over time, as you use it, you can improve it. But if it doesn't work, then at least you know it doesn't work, and you go and don't spend a whole lot of time refining something that doesn't work. The first thing is to prove that it works. Okay, great. I want that result. These steps gave me that result. Okay, now we can document the finer points, but I know that I'm going to keep getting that same result that I want. So, I hope you got some value from today. Can't see what, can't see how. So, opportunity for you. Two, actually, we'll go to. Number one, if you want a design that works, head over to magicboards.io. That's magicboards.io, and you can grab this consistent design. It's pretty easy to install, but once you see it, you're like, oh, okay, cool. Hopefully it now makes sense why that design is there. And next week, we're going to talk a little bit more about the old magic board. But the second one is, hey, do you know someone who's struggling, who is working way too hard, that is stressed out of their mind, that is having team problems, that's having problems in business, perhaps even ideally, they were doing well and then the wheels have fallen off and they're not sure why. That is the situation that we're dealing with. If you're not there and things are going well, then guess what? You can avoid that situation by implementing this stuff now. But if you know someone's suffering, then hey, send them a message and say, hey, I listened to this podcast. It sounded like you might be in that situation. Don't know if it's going to help, but check it out. It's going to take half an hour. If you like it, you like it. If not, that's cool too. But I do want to thank you for investing your time into this podcast. Obviously, it's the first one, just solo, just me. So I hope I was able to deliver. Maybe not as quite as well as Annabelle, but hopefully she will be returning to us soon once those vocal cord nodules are resolved. So that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to The Visible Workplace. I look forward to seeing you on our next episode where we look at the history of the magic board. See you then. Thanks for joining us at The Visual Workplace. This is a notification that the information and ideas discussed here are general in nature and do not take into account your specific circumstances. You should seek specialist advice for any medical, financial, emotional, mental, or other difficulties that you are facing with appropriate specialists and professionals so that they can apply your specific circumstances and give you the required advice. Thank you for joining us, but this is also a notification that all information is indeed general in nature and not specific for your personal circumstances.